I have a problem. I'm struggling. There was a psychiatrist that said that I just had ADHD, gave me Adderall and said, go and do your thing.
Did you ever feel like this is a whole new reality?
I couldn't have that conversation because
Marhsall Glaze was a breakout star on season 4 of Netflix's hit reality dating show, Love is Blind.
Marhsall has amassed a large social following where he shares uplifting and encouraging messages to create meaningful connections online and beyond.
I was having like really, really deep suicidal thoughts. I own a gun, loaded it, and my arm felt like 1,000 pounds. I couldn't.
How do you stop that from happening? So you've been doing a lot, constantly on the go. Marhsall, welcome to Gents Talk.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about this conversation. When you and I spoke on the phone, we were talking about the importance of men's health and mental health because you've started to curate some of the content that you put out online towards this conversation, to lend your voice to this really important narrative around what it means to be a man today and that it's okay to not be okay. But before we dive into that, what do I need to know about you in order to understand who Marhsall is?
Wow, that's a great question. Who am I? I'm just a guy, ambitious, wanting a lot and knowing I can have a lot for myself, but knowing that the journey there is difficult and it comes with a lot of tests, a lot of hardship. But when you have people around you like yourself, welcome to the family now.
I appreciate it.
Makes going through life a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And that's always who I've been. Just always humble, honest, vulnerable, and very caring, and always in tune with my emotions. And that's who I've been. That's how I carry myself through Love is Blind, and that's how I'm carrying myself throughout.
You said that you've always been this way?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine you meet a little bit of resistance along the way for being the guy with the big emotions,
Yeah.
the one who's not afraid to show them, express them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to encounter tons of people who are just going to be like, no, that's just not, like, that's too much. You're too emotional for me, man.
Yeah. Luckily, I've had a good group of friends that I travel with throughout school to help kind of armor me from a lot of the hate that I garnered from a lot of individuals because I was, in their eyes, soft. I was the one who got played by girls all the time, who didn't have what they say now, riz. I didn't have game, but I did. They just didn't know.
Smart.
No, being teased for being who I am and who I always have been has just been part of the game. So coming into being a public figure and having thousands of people insert themselves into my love life, my personal opinions, how I carry myself, it just kind of bounces right off of me because I've endured that my entire life. It is not easy being the most caring person in the room.
I've had enough conversations with people who've talked about being very open with their emotions. They wear it on their sleeve. They're not afraid to show it, but it's also bitten them because they've been hurt by the way people have responded to them, where then they've suddenly started to shift subconsciously towards holding back a little bit, and then a little more, and a little more, until eventually they're just not the same person anymore. Mm-hmm. Has that happened to you?
Thankfully, no.
How do you stop that from happening?
Never putting your guard up. I mean, it's a part of the game to be hurt when you are vulnerable. When you let people in, you always want to see the best in people when they show you that they're not. It's inevitable that they're gonna show you who they are and they're gonna hurt you in turn. but not closing yourself off to that. And in terms of love too, like in relationships, man, it's just being hurt so many times, and often sometimes the one doing the hurting. You can't close yourself off to it, because you never know when the next person comes along and you're just like guarded and you have this iron wall and you're blocking your blessings. I see that with everything in life, whether it's opportunities, work, profession, like money, anything that's involved with that. You're blocking yourself off from a lot of opportunities when you close yourself off to who you are at your core.
When was the last time a situation, a person has hurt you so profoundly that you had to stop and recalibrate?
Most recently. We're in a better place now, but I have a very big vision for myself.
Yeah.
Especially with Love is Blind, everything that's come after that. It's been fantastic opportunities. And there was a relationship that developed, and we were madly in love with each other, engaged and pushing towards the finish line. And there came a time where I didn't feel like myself anymore. And it was because I wasn't living in my purpose. What I felt like I needed to be doing with my life. As a man, as a human, I wasn't living in my truth. And it became less about being Marhsall, and it became more about, oh, that's the guy from Love is Blind.
A persona.
And I didn't want that. And I felt that. And I knew that I needed to do more. But the area that I was living in, we were in Seattle, and the opportunities just kind of capped themselves there. And in other markets, there are a lot more opportunity. So I decided to pursue other areas and came down here to Los Angeles, and we ended up parting ways because she believes that she wants her person there, enjoying life and doing things in person, which I totally agree with. There's nothing wrong with that
at all. No, yeah.
I think where I've just recently kind of gotten to a place where I understand now that she has put her flag in the ground and she's not moving, and I have as well. And that's okay. We are not ruling each other out. We are still in communication. We're still trying to grow together. I think where I fell short with understanding was I couldn't wrap my head around somebody who just couldn't believe in my vision.
That's a hard one.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt and try to see her perspective, but it was also just like, hey, trust me, trust that we can make this long distance work. Even if it's LA to Seattle, which really isn't that long of a distance, we can make this work. And we can still do this life together. And we just didn't make it.
I commend you because it takes courage. I commend you both, actually, because it takes courage to, do the adult thing and say, this is my boundary. Like, this is as far as I'm willing to go. And as much as I care about you, I can only go so far for this without sacrificing who I am as a result. And I imagine from your perspective, looking at all of these opportunities and, the potential to do more and greater things, can be easily perceived as selfish. But I mean, I resonate with that because I have this conversation with my fiance all the time of, I want to do more. I want to grow more. I want to do A, B, and C. And, just in this month alone, I've been traveling more than I've been home. And it feels like a long distance relationship sometimes. Yeah. And we talk about the challenges of like, I'm not around, right? Like 2 weeks ago, we were in Las Vegas and something had happened with our dog and she had to sort of deal with that by herself. And she's like, in that moment I felt alone because you weren't available. And she's like, I'm not mad at you, but you weren't available. And so I can empathize with how hard that can be. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you were talking about the opportunities coming off a show like Love is Blind, as good as those opportunities are, I'm wondering, being on a show like that, I've had people tell me how sometimes it can also feel isolating when you're sort of on set doing the thing and then you sort of come out into the real world and now you've got this new reality. Did that ever sort of affect you in that way? Like once you came off the show, did you ever feel like suddenly like this is a whole new reality that I got to now recalibrate with?
Not at first. I was a little bit in denial of it.
Okay.
I had this this weird thing where I was just like, I'm not gonna let it change me. I'm the same person, but you really aren't.
Yeah.
You're not the same person. You aren't the small town kid from Baltimore City. You're Marhsall Glaze. You are a person who has a fan base.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me to internalize, saying that word. And I even have a hard time people say like you're a celebrity. I don't feel like I am because of who I feel like I am and how I carry myself.
Yeah.
I don't feel like a celebrity. And I will never claim that until it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, I'm a celebrity. But yeah, it's weird because even though you have a fraternity of people who go through the show from past seasons and from your co-stars, it's isolating because their experiences are not yours.
Yeah.
Their opportunities are not yours. You hear a lot of things coming to different people and you're like, oh man, that sounds cool. Why haven't they hit me up? Or why can't I do the things you're doing? But it's just two separate tracks. And it can be isolating at times, for sure. It's difficult.
How do you sort of balance this new reality? Because I suspect to some degree there's an outward-facing persona, and then there's Marshall's private face, the one that you keep reserved for yourself, for your close family, your friends. How do you navigate a world with two of those?
You know what's funny? I'm not that kind of guy. I don't feel like I have that.
Okay.
I feel like what you see is what you get. And that's always been me.
It's a good place to be in.
It's so easy to just kind of live one life and not allow people's perceptions or perspectives shift how you carry yourself, because it's easy to do that. You show pieces of yourself behind closed doors and you're like in the back of your mind like, well, if I post that, are they gonna cook me?
Yeah.
Are they gonna cancel me? You don't know what's going to happen in the face of the public. So it's, I see a lot of people who I'm around and a lot of friends, they're like Bruce Wayne one day and then online they're Batman, you know what I mean? So it can be a challenge for some people who feel like they have to do that. And fortunately, I'm so blessed to say this, I don't have to do that because I showed up as who I am in real life on my season. And I show up as who I am in real life on the internet. So when you meet me in person, it's the same exact way.
What advice would you give to people who are struggling with the persona that they put on for the public? And it doesn't even just apply to anybody with a social media following or they were on a show or anything like that. But even your everyday person who goes to work and puts on a persona and then comes home and takes that off. What advice would you give them about how to stay true to their authentic self? Because I think ultimately we all want that. I want to be me as I am.
Yeah. Man, I wish I had the answer. I think you just hit on the head with the authenticity. Staying true to who you are, I think is the most important piece of that. And there's no rhyme or reason. There's no playbook. There's no rule book. If you feel like you want to show up as a certain version of yourself, do that as authentic as you can, and then branch out into other authentic pieces of yourself. If you're only showing a goofy side, maybe try a serious side. If you're making only cooking content, maybe you try doing talking content, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Showing different sides of yourself as you feel comfortable doing it is paramount in staying authentic to yourself.
Speaking of content making, you put out content that talks to the importance of mental health and wellness. And I see some of the comments. I see some that are praising and very much vocal about the importance of it. I've seen a handful of comments that are, a little more negative. And I just wonder why you felt it was important to use the platform that you've now built to share this message when when you could easily just keep it for professional business reasons and partnerships and all that, you've decided, I want to use my voice for this reason.
Yeah, because showing this, the yacht, the parties, the car, it's a facade. It's not real. None of it is. I mean, even the stuff that I post, it's not real. So social media is not a real place. So going in it with that mindset and just knowing that you can show up however you want to, that's how I go into that mindset. I'm gonna show up how I want to, and I'm gonna show up where it matters. And so mental health matters, men's health matters, and I mean, really just health in general, but wellness and taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally matters. And it really helps talking about it. I feel like there was a time when, at the top of the year, this year actually, I was having a really hard time mentally. And it wasn't until I opened up about it with my fraternity brother, with my friends, that I found healing in that. You know, as men, we don't typically talk about a lot of the things that we go through with each other.
Yeah.
I've opened up to my mom or my fiance. I talked about these things with women, but not necessarily men, because we don't want to be like, you know, teased about certain things. And I just got to a point where I'm like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I'm really struggling right now.
And it's interesting that we feel more comfortable having that conversation with women because we feel like they won't laugh and judge us because they're so good at having these conversations.
Exactly.
Forever, women are shown that it's okay to express yourself, whereas we're told to bottle it up, shut it down, man up.
Yeah.
And we finally find that little bit of outlet, which is why sometimes as men, we also dump everything onto one person. And it's usually our partner.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of that.
Same.
Where it's like, you're not only my partner, you're my friend, my confidant, my advisor, my A, B, and C, everything. I'm curious, as you were talking about the top of the year being challenging, was there something specific that just triggered it to the point where you're like, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I like I had mentioned earlier, just I was feeling like a shell of myself. I was rotting away each day. I had left the job because I was just feeling so unfulfilled, and I was going from social media brand deal, doing ads online. And I just felt like that's not me. Yeah, never was me. I didn't go on Love Is Blind to be that guy. I didn't aspire to be a billboard. And so doing that, you know, we often tie ourselves to our professions as men, because we have to provide. And so if you're not living in your professional self, you don't feel like yourself. And that's how I was at the top of the year. And it went on probably until like May and June, July. It wasn't until I moved down here where I started to feel a little bit better, a little bit more like myself. And you know what triggered it was there was a rock bottom moment. There was a day where I called my mom, and I was okay with that being the last time I talked to my mom. And that was when I knew I needed help.
Take your time.
I haven't really talked to anybody about this, like I said, so I'm trying my hardest to let it out.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
January and mid-February was really difficult. Seattle's a really tough place to live regardless. But this time it really hurt me because I was having like really, really deep suicidal thoughts. And I'd always kind of been morbidly curious. It's like, oh, what's on the other side? But never really thought about it and had a plan. And the day that I called my mom, that was going to be the day. I couldn't live with the pain of not knowing anymore about myself, about my trajectory. my plan, what life was just too big. And no matter which way I turned, I just felt like I was in a box. And the walls just kept getting closer, closer, closer. And there was no way out. And so I actually opened up to my mom about that. It was almost as if I was saying goodbye to her. And I was home alone. My fiance was at work. She is a nurse practitioner, and she does 24-hour shifts in the hospital. And that was that specific day where she was pulling that kind of shift. And so it was raining outside. I'll never forget it. It was like 3 o'clock Pacific and 6 o'clock on the East Coast. And I called my mom and said, hey, Mom, I don't think I can do it anymore. And I explained to her why. And I also led with, I also understand more now and empathize more with people who have committed suicide, because it's so courageous to do that. When you're at your lowest and you are minutes away from taking your life and you actually go through with it, you are, in my opinion, the most courageous that you've ever been. To know that your time is done and you're willing to take your life for it, that is the epitome of courage. And I told my mom that. And she got quiet. Got really quiet. She asked me if I was okay, and I said no. And I own a gun. I've always had it for a very long time now. Just always been fascinated by firearms, and recreationally I shoot. I never really have ammo in the house. I have 10 rounds for safety purposes. Loaded it. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, talking to my mom, just bouncing it. And I said, okay, Mom, I'll talk to you later. Click. And my arm felt like 1,000 pounds. I couldn't lift it. I wasn't courageous enough. And so I dropped it. And I got up, I didn't have shoes on. I was in basketball shorts, had a cutoff shirt, and it was pouring rain outside, and I just left. And I don't remember seeing anybody on the sidewalk. And Seattle is a very walkable city. Nobody's on the sidewalk. There's no cars. I lived on a busy street. There's no cars, no buses. And it was just me. I walked around the block, pouring rain, soaking wet. And that was honestly what saved my life, was just letting it go. I think that was the symbol. Like I was holding on to something that I knew that I didn't need to anymore, and letting go of that gun, letting it hit the floor and getting out of the house, that saved my life. That was the moment where I let it go. And I decided that I wanted to live. Because I wanted to call my mom again. I wanted to come home to my fiance. I wanted to live out my vision. I wanted to be the best that I knew I could be. And after that moment, I still kind of struggled with it a little bit moving forward, because that was in January, February. And I struggled with the mental health and mental stability a little bit into the middle of the year, and seeing therapists. And there was a psychiatrist that said that I just had ADHD, and gave me Adderall and said, go and do your thing. That didn't fucking help. The most commonly misdiagnosed disorder ever. Yep. And so, I realized that through that pain, I feel like I discovered a passion, because I talked about it. And I will never forget this either. I was trying to figure out a new content series because I thought that was going to make me feel a little bit better. putting myself to work, diverting that energy into something else. And I called my fraternity brother. He's older than me. He's got kids. He's married, and he's a multimedia journalist. He built a news outlet from scratch, and he's a comms director. And we've always wanted to do something together. And so I called him. I'm like, hey, can we talk about this podcast? I've been doing some research. Hop into this room with this podcast server, and let's just kind of jam and talk about it. And we always open the call with, hey, brother, how are you? And that was the moment I was like, I'm going to talk to him about it. And I opened up. I said, I'm actually struggling really, really hard. Last month, I was thinking about committing suicide. And he told me then that he was really struggling with it as well. And the day before, he had a really deep moment with himself where he was almost going to do it. And we just sat there, we cried. When I tell you, Samir, when I tell you, we sat there and cried for like 15 minutes.
Gave me goosebumps.
We didn't say anything together. 15 minutes. Just cried. And that honestly that's saving grace right there. Talking about it. A month later, I talk about it with more friends. And then I'm like, you know what? This could be something here. So before, my content was like really polished. And it still kind of is. But it was polished to the point where I would have a teleprompter. I write a script. I had a teleprompter. And I was thinking about doing the content series that I do now, but more like scripted. And I'm like, nah. I just turn on the camera and I just talk. I'm talking to myself. And so it is so beautiful to see other people resonate with that style of content, with what I'm putting out, because it just shows that whatever you're going through, somebody else is going through it as well.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that story with me. Thank you for trusting me to have that conversation. I think it takes, on the topic of courage, I think it took courage for you to drop that gun. I think that's where the real courage came in. To drop it and make that decision to go, I'm choosing to live. I'm choosing, despite the hardships and the very reasons that got me to this point, I'm choosing to go through it. And that, to me, is real courage. And for you to open up about the conversation with your friend, your fraternity brother, and then for him to go, yeah, me too. Like, as if he'd been waiting for someone else to just tell him, hey, it's going to be okay. And there's going to be so many people out there that hear it, watch it, who will never message you, will never reach out, but you've had that impact. That's courage. You're changing their lives in that way. And that's real impact, that's real purpose. And that'll be better than any polished content that you can ever put out. That's what I believe. So thank you for doing that. And please keep doing it, because there needs to be more of these conversations around these subjects. Like, let's not pretend they're not happening. Let's not pretend that people aren't struggling. Yeah. We just came out of a global pandemic where we're all isolated for so long. Pandora's box has been opened for so many of us. All of our traumas and insecurities and failed relationships and all these things boiling to the surface, and now we're expected to return to some level of normalcy as if none of that happened. Right. But you can't just bury all that back in. Yeah. And we have to be more conscious in having these conversations. Yeah. And there's going to be men out there who are going to hear you speak this way and go, to your point earlier, no, that's soft. And those men are still walking around with so much pain inside. Mm-hmm. And I feel for them, because if you pull them aside and you have a private conversation with them, you can see it in their eyes, that longing for connection, the permission to finally open up and say, hey, I'm also not doing well with this. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be anything grand. It could just be, you know what, my job is just, it's making me struggle. Yeah. Yeah. There's guys who will come up and say that you're, there's guys that will come up and say that you're sassy. That you're soft, that you're weak, but
they're the ones who are $10,000 in debt and are struggling to make the payments. They're the ones who can't put food in their babies' mouths. They're the ones who are going home to a woman who they can't possibly love the way that they really need to love because they're not living in their truth.
Yeah.
They're the ones who step out. They're the ones who cheat because they can't look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, I have a problem.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. So they just rather just project and live in this facade of masculinity that all of us are trying so hard to redefine these days. They want to live in the past. A lot of us who are having these conversations, we want to redefine what it is to be a man. And it is so difficult when we have resisting factors.
Yep.
There are bad apples in our bunch that don't let us be great because they're the masses and they are the majority and we are the minority. Fighting upstream
Yep.
against, we're basically, there's a quote, Heath Ledger's Joker said this, you're an immovable, when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. There's resistance and we're trying to fight against each other when we should just be going with the flow. Yeah. There's room for whatever masculinity was back then, but there's also room for masculinity now. How can we find a common ground?
Well, I think a lot of the challenges for some, like anytime I have these conversations with men who are still sort of stuck in their ways, a lot of it comes from a place of fear, a place of, let's not soften men. Let's not make men feminine. Let's not, this is concerning. I need to protect my sons.
Yeah.
To be clear, what you guys like you and I are saying is you can be emotionally regulated. Mm-hmm. You can focus on your mental health. You can make sure that when you're not okay, you understand it's okay that you're not feeling great. And that doesn't take away from your masculinity. You have not suddenly become soft. You have not suddenly become a pushover mm-hmm. or someone who can be tossed around and taken advantage of. Like none of that happens. Mm-hmm. And there's this fear and resistance of, if I start expressing my emotions, then people will see me as weak. And and I'm curious if you find this too, when I lead with vulnerability and I say, hey, the pandemic was hard for me, just like it was for almost everybody. But in particular, I struggled with it because I was going through a divorce at the same time. And so to go through literally splitting up 3 weeks before lockdowns happened and then living in isolation because you can't go anywhere, and now suddenly having to face my demons, understanding why it didn't work, understanding where I didn't show up as a husband, as a partner, as a friend, understanding that I actually didn't have men in my life that I can turn to for advice and guidance. And if maybe they were there, maybe I could have asked one of them along the way, like, hey, I'm not feeling great. Should I do something different? Mm-hmm. When I lead with that kind of vulnerability, I see the response just suddenly like open up. Yeah. And I go, wow, thank you for that. You know what? I've been fighting with my partner all week. Yeah. And it's not that we don't care about each other. We're butting heads. It's just been a rough week.
Yeah.
And that just gets them to talk a little more.
Yeah. And it's not even just like a human response, it's a universe response.
Yeah.
Once you're able to break down your walls and be more vulnerable, the universe opens itself up. Yeah. And there's so many things that happen in realization. And I realized that I fell short with my fiance. I was broken. And I couldn't look myself in the mirror and say, hey, I don't know if I'm ready to be a husband yet, because my mental health is horrible. I'm not where I want to be professionally. Financially, I was okay, but still not where I want to be.
Yeah.
I couldn't have that conversation because I was holding on to this thing that I had to be a provider.
Yeah.
And having that honest conversation that I'm not a provider was difficult. She actually said that to me one day where, she is very successful, doing great work in Seattle at the top of her career. And I would watch her go and do her thing that she was always passionate about, that she worked so relentlessly for years. She worked relentlessly to get to where she is. And I watched that and I'm just like, man, I want some of that. She inspired me to go and do the things that I'm doing now, but I just couldn't tell her that. And I don't know why.
You're afraid of feeling less than.
Yeah.
I know that feeling well. And, you know, it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking, it's almost like you were just saying the things that I was feeling at the time too, where I kept thinking to myself, you know, I worked as hard as I did to get to the altar. And then I was like, all right, I'm done. I did it. I checked off the box.
Man.
And now that's when the real work started, but I didn't know what it actually required to be a husband.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had to put in the work daily.
Yeah.
The communication that was required. I used to, it's funny, her and I used to not laugh, but like we would look at other couples that would argue and be like, see, like their communication sucks. And we'd be like, aren't we so lucky that our communication is great? Meanwhile, neither of us was actually telling the other how we really felt about things. And so we kept just burying it and then split further and further apart until the gap was just too wide. And then I didn't show up the way I wanted to. And it took me a while to unlearn that I took on all the responsibility for the failure. I was like, I am the reason why it failed from A to Z. And then I had to slowly go, well, there's two people in a relationship. This is where she didn't show up. This is where I didn't show up. This is where we both didn't show up.
Yeah.
And having that constant back and forth was a learning process, and it was hard. And the only way out of it was through it. And you really had to you had to have an honest conversation with yourself of like, listen, Samir, this is where you screwed up.
Yeah.
Like that is on you.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to do. And I think a lot of guys are still also afraid of, they know where they're wrong, but they're afraid to finally admit it to themselves.
Yeah. And I always hid behind that, like, oh, I'm always going to admit when I'm wrong. Not always.
No.
I also hide behind, I was hiding, I'm trying not to hide behind that anymore. I'm behind the facade of being the good guy. Like, oh, I'm the good guy. You know, I can't do any wrong. Hell yeah, you can.
Everybody can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you do it in the shadows, you do it behind closed doors, you do it out in front of them. You can do wrong. Yeah. Even if you are a good guy, it doesn't mean that you're a bad guy. You've just done bad things.
Yep.
And I couldn't bear to hear that whenever she would say things like, "Hey, you're hurting me," or "Hey, you said this thing." I'm like, I'm a great guy. I couldn't have possibly hurt you.
Yeah.
I just couldn't bear to hear that. And it's maturing is realizing that, just like I said, that just because you're a good guy doesn't mean that you are absolved from hurting people. And I acknowledge the pain that I've dealt to people. And you know, although there's a lot worse that could have been done, there's a lot that I have done that I have to take accountability for, and I feel like I have. In going back and kind of like talking about things and addressing things, as it's so funny to talk about things after the relationship is done. After you've broken up, you kind of revisit things and you're able to talk about things a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
That's how it's been with me and my fiance. I still call her my fiance because I didn't want to break up. But yeah, we're in constant communication, and I'm always learning through our newly established communication style that, hey, you know, you weren't the best guy.
It's a reality check when that happens.
Yeah.
I've had to learn to come to terms with the fact that I will forever be the villain in someone else's story.
Oh my God, that is the toughest thing to go through. Being the author of someone's pain is difficult.
Yeah. And no matter how many times, there's absolutely nothing I can do today, tomorrow, next month, next year that will change that. In their mind, when they think of me, I am the evil one. And that is a very hard pill to swallow. Yeah. Because a part of me wants them to just be like, no, you just don't know me. Like, trust me, I'm a good guy. I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Whatever.
Yeah. It's not what I meant.
No. Yeah. Oh, my favorite. Which is why I'm like so focused on making sure my communication is like so. Yeah. Because I'm like, I want you to know what I mean. But this concept of being the villain in someone's story is. It took me a while to finally go, you know what? that's their version of me. And that version of me may have existed or existed in that time. But it's not the version of me that exists today, here and now, in the present.
Right.
And to your point, I may have done bad things, but I'm not a bad guy. And I live with intention and purpose to make sure that I treat people with kindness and fairness. And it almost sounds like I'm saying all these things out loud to make myself feel better, but it's how I try to ensure that I don't fall back into the trap of like, someone out there thinks I'm the worst. Is there advice you can give to other men listening, watching this, who are struggling and understand that they're in a position where their struggles are preventing them from showing up for their partner the way that they want to? Something that you've learned along your journey that you can maybe share with them?
Yeah, I think step one is just acknowledging that there's something going on. You know when something's going on.
You feel it.
You know when you're not eating right, when you're not exercising regularly, when you're not feeling like yourself, you know it.
Yeah.
And that's the first indicator. Trust that. Don't just sweep it under the rug and say, oh, I'm just gonna try again tomorrow. That compounds. All those days compound. That was one of the hardest things for me to kind of hold on to was the minute that my life changed and the social media following came and the opportunities were coming, that changed me. And I swept it under the rug. I'm still the same person. I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need to address what happened last year. I probably should have. I probably should have unpacked and addressed the things that happened on my season and didn't take it into the next relationship. And what did I do? Swept it under the rug. I wasn't feeling like myself. I wasn't doing the things that I love to do as Marhsall. I wasn't feeding my soul, and I was looking for somebody else to do that. I wasn't filling my cup, so I looked to my fiance, hey, I need you to come fill my cup for me.
Yeah.
And instead, what did I do? Swept it under the rug. So that's the advice that I would give, is just acknowledging it and not letting one day get to the next in terms of like your struggles. Acknowledge it and attack it head on. It's very common to be non-confrontational with yourself and know that it's completely okay to be confrontational with yourself and attack it, because once you do, you're 10 times better. Go to that therapist, talk to your friend, talk to your spouse, talk to somebody about it. Open up.
Someone, yeah.
Journal.
Up.
Yeah,
Right.
journal.
Something.
Yeah. Oh my God, dude, journaling?
It's huge.
Yeah. Even if it's taking your phone out,
Yeah.
doing a new note, or if you got some sticky pads lying around, just pop a pen, write it down, and that's talking about it is healing. That's growth, and you're able to outwardly say to yourself, when you write it down. Sometimes I do this myself. I write shit down and can I curse?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I write stuff down and I'm like, that sounds ridiculous. And I crumple it up and I throw it away. And I never think about it ever again. Never.
But that was the point of the exercise.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I'm,
Externalize it, get it out there, get rid of it.
Yeah. If I was mad at something, I would write it down, or I would be frustrated with myself or whatever. I would write down that same feeling about, okay, what happened? How do you feel? I'm mad that the refrigerator broke and my steak went bad. I'm mad about that? That's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can apply to a lot of different things in life. And so journaling is huge. People overlook that.
I remember the first time I started doing it, I was resistant to it at first, and I don't do it nearly as often as I'd like to. But I remember when I first started doing it, there was this, my brain's just going, a million thoughts a minute. And then when you journal, you have to slow it down because you can't write as quickly. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly it forces your brain to slow all the way down and go, okay, I'm going to take a moment, write it out, and then move forward.
Yeah.
Marhsall, I want to ask you one question here. Mm-hmm. I want you to think back to the Marhsall that was sitting on that bed. Mm-hmm. If you can go back to him, give him one piece of advice, say something to him, what would you say to him? What did you need to hear in that moment?
I would say that it's not me, it's my environment. I was a plant that just outgrew its pot. And I needed to just remove myself from that pot into another one to grow even more. And I know for the next time that if it ever gets like that, that's what it is. I needed a hug. I needed someone who wasn't my fiance to help get me through that, because I relied on her for a lot during that time, and it just kind of bubbled over. I didn't have anybody around me to help me through that. And I think in that moment, I just needed to just take a deep breath. That's why I got a tattoo right here. Breathe. Just take a deep breath.
Reminder.
The little things. You know, I often spiral out of control to the point where just taking a second just to pause. Put your phone down, turn the TV off, turn the music off, take your shoes off. Ball your
Grounded.
feet. Yeah, ball your feet, just like feel yourself. Take a deep breath. Count 5 things around the room. 5 sensations. Can you taste? Can you feel? Can you smell? What are you seeing? Just slow down. That's a big part of what I needed in that moment, was just to slow down. Things were going so quickly, and my mind was just spiraling out of control. Slow down. Slow.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time with us here. Thank you for sharing this incredible journey, this inspiring journey. I think it's so powerful. I think there's so many people that can resonate with different parts of your story. I think there's so many people who are going to be able to take that and really reflect on how that impacts them. And I sincerely hope that you continue doing what you're doing, genuinely, because there's a light there. And more people need to hear it. More people need to see it. And you keep finding bigger pots, because you have a lot to give, a lot to offer. And I think so many people will be better off for it. So thank you for sharing your story again. Thank you for, I know we just met in person for the first time, but I feel like I know you.
Yeah, man, you've got this presence that's just like calming, and that's rare these days, especially when you're talking about things like we talked about. It's important. So you're good at what you do, man. You keep going.
Yeah. I will try my best.
Yes, sir.
For more of these conversations.
Yes.
Brother, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Thank you so much, everybody.